Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us on Monday for ZingTrain webinar. Going to give folks just a couple of moments to populate in. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello. Okay, I'm going to begin. I have a couple of housekeeping things anyways. Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. We are here to talk about how to create a company vision. My name is Katie Alexander. I am ZingTrain's community builder and webinar host. I'm thrilled to be here alongside Joni and Timo. They are two trainers here at ZingTrain, and they have a combined 30 years experience with the visioning process. So they have a lot to share, and there is a lot to learn from them. We also have Mara Ferguson behind the scenes. She is our keynote liaison, and she will be monitoring the chat and your questions with me throughout the hour. All four of us are here at ZingTrain in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we always love hearing where everyone else is tuning in from. So if you want to drop your location in the chat, which is at the bottom of your screen, it'd be great to see where you're coming from. And then also you can see if you have any neighbors that might be in the room with you as well, and you can say hi. I have 3 tips to help us make the most of our time together before I turn things off. The first one is today's webinar format. So Joni and Timo are going to be sharing here with all of you for a bit, and we will leave time at the end for question and answer. And we're going to be collecting your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. So that's also at the bottom of your screen. And you can feel free to submit questions there throughout the presentation. Mara and I will be collecting them. And then at the end, I will come back so that we can answer some of those. We're going to do our very best to answer as many as we can. If we cannot get to all of them, then we do send this webinar out as a recording after today, and we will include resources to some of those additional questions in that email. The second thing is that there is closed captioning available during today's webinar. And if you'd like to turn that on, Mara is going to drop details in the chat. It is, again, another button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then the last thing to know is that we are recording today's webinar because we're going to be sending it out to all of you along with the slides. And it also is going to live forevermore on ZingTrain's website. We have a free resources section that includes past webinars, blog posts, and this will become another one of those resources for you. So that's everything from me. I will return for the Q&A, and I'll turn things over to Joni.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. So nice to see so many familiar names in the webinar chat too. So hello back to all of you. Glad you're all here. So as said, my name is Joni. I have worked at Zingerman's for just over 20 years. I'm joined by my longtime colleague, Timo. We're really excited to have you all join us today to talk about the visioning process. Timo and I have both been a part of writing many visions at Zingerman's, and through our seminars and workshops, private training, through webinars like this, I think we've helped hundreds of companies and organizations and departments write their own visions. And I think it's truly one of the most inspiring and engaging parts of our work. So when we get the opportunity to share it with other folks, whether that's for the first time or this is a way to deepen or strengthen your knowledge of visioning because you've used it in the past, it's just really exciting to us. So today's webinar, it's going to take a deeper look into how we write visions for large groups. So in a large group can be an entire company, the entire organization. It could be a nonprofit. It could be for a department. The goal today is to share with you what a vision is, the different ways to approach writing a group vision, how you can get feedback on that vision, and how you can take the leap from having a draft vision to having a final vision. As Katie had said, we love questions. Encourage you to put them in as we talk about today, or as we work through today, or as we talk about the different content areas. Please put them in because we would love to be able to answer them for you. So to truly get us started and dive into the definition of a vision, I'll turn things over to Timo.
Thanks, Joni. Again, I would second all the things that Joni said about the opportunity to do this work with organizations. It was one of the first big shifts in my mind of, oh my goodness, there's this amazing tool. So I want to jump into what do we mean when we say vision here at Zingerman's? Because there's lots of operational definitions that people have used, and there's lots of versions that I've seen out in the world. But at Zingerman's, we really define vision as a picture of what success looks like at a particular point in time in the future, right? Described with enough specific detail, right? Richness of detail that we'll know when we've arrived. It's more like a story than a bullet-pointed list. It's written in the present tense as though it's already happening, not going to happen. So it's we are, not we're going to, or we have, not we are thinking about. And that descriptive nature of it is really, really a critical thing where we want to give those clear, meaningful mental pictures, the images that excite and inspire and start to think about what are those we did it moments that we can create. We like to think of visioning as almost relentlessly positive. Not that everything is pie in the sky, because that's fake and false and we can't do those things. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more, but thinking about what are we including things about how we overcome obstacles. The thing is, we don't have to know how we're going to do it to write the vision. That's the problem solving afterwards. The vision is what success looks like, not how we're going to get there. So what makes for an effective vision is we're doing this process. We think about 4 key elements in being able to do this. 1 is that it's inspiring. 2 is that it's strategically sound. And those 2 have a natural battle against each other where they're kind of weighing one against the other. And we think about this as a kind of constant teeter-totter, a balancing effort of making it inspiring enough, but not feeling like it's impossible. Because if it's too inspiring, it's just a hallucination up in the sky. If it's too strategically sound, no one's excited. So there's a balance there that we create in order to make this work. The third piece, that documented, means that we want to make sure it's written down so we can come back to it and have it as a tangible thing and remind ourselves of what we're aiming at. And that documentation makes it a whole lot easier to communicate and share that information with everyone. And so we can say, this is exactly what we're aiming at. These are the pieces we're trying to get to. I liken that balance between strategically sound and documented to that rubber band. Right? A strategically sound is touching the ground and the rubber band is stretching up towards the sky. Right when that rubber band is about to break, you start to feel the fibers start to tear and become less there. Right before it breaks, when you kind of wince when you're holding it, that's a perfect vision, because there should be a little fear. There could be a little concern in that moment. Can we do this? And as I said earlier, it's not the problem solving of how we're going to do this. It's what could success look like if we had and did the things we wanted to. So that's really kind of where we start within the definition. But in order to do it, we also want to make sure we share a couple things that it's not. It's not for us the mission statement where we have this clear idea that in our definition, our mission statement is our North Star. It's a thing that we aim at and it's constantly there. We'll never quite achieve it, but we are constantly aware of it and use it to guide our actions and behaviors. The vision is for a specific time-bound section, right? Zingerman's currently has a 2032 vision. ZingTrain has a 2028. I personally have a 2025. So we use different time scales, but there's always a specific ending time. And so this is one of the differentiators between mission and vision statements. The other thing, and I glanced on this earlier, is that it's not how. A lot of times, and I came from the nonprofit world before, and we did a lot of strategic planning, and I did a master's in it and found out and got frustrated as I started here at Zingerman's, the failure of that strategic planning process of having visioning be first. Because you need a vision in order to help put together a strategic plan, because the vision is what success looks like. The strategic plan is then how we're going to get there. And getting clear on those 2 pieces is really one of the core elements of your success. My favorite example of this in literature is Alice in Wonderland. She talks about the concept of being able to say, going up to the woods and finding a fork in the road. She asked Cheshire Cat, which way should I go? Right? This is a very how, which way should I go? And Cheshire Cat says, where are you headed? She says, I don't know. And so Cheshire Cat says, well, either place will take you somewhere. This is what strategic planning is without a vision. We don't know where we're headed, and so we'll get somewhere. And so that's part of the value we think of this, is it creates the what, so then all of our how, all of our effort is focused and intentional as we try to move forward. So if we have this definition, then let's get into the greater ideas of what we're going to do today and how we're going to process this information today. Here's our 10,000-foot view. As we move through the process, this is what we think about in putting together a visioning kind of formula in order to help an organization of any size and any process to get through the process. There's some key process decisions. We're going to talk about how we make those decisions, who makes those decisions, who's responsible for them, and what the income and outcomes are based on some of those things. If some has this input, what vision do we get? If this group has input, what does it look like? And so getting clear that we have each of these different decision processes. How are we going to write the first draft? Who's involved? Whose voices do we have in the room? And then getting feedback, rolling through that part of the process so we understand that we have put together a process we think works pretty well. It's not perfect. We've made mistakes, but we always get some feedback and get a really good way of making sure we can move it forward in the best interest of a majority of the people. Editing the first draft, getting through that process of doing the edits and fixing, and then doing steps 3 and 4 again and again. They're iterative until we get to that point of saying, yep, we are ready. This is our vision, and we'd love to move forward. So when thinking about this component, right, we want to make sure that we are pretty clear that we are working on, here's the elements. We'll dig into each one of these elements a little more deeply. And I'm going to turn you over to Joni to start the first one on making those key process decisions.
Awesome. Thank you. But I just realized I can't share my screen, Timo, while you are sharing for some reason. I'm getting an alert that I can't.
There you go.
So weird. I wonder. Okay. Hey, now I can. So thank you for that. Okay, so as Timo said, the first step is making the key process decisions. What this entails is deciding who is going to create the vision, who gets to contribute to the vision, and then how will these decisions be made? What this reminds me of, and I think maybe my coworkers have heard me say this before, but one of my favorite phrases that I learned in a college course on project management is you plan the work and then you work the plan. So this is creating the plan. And then once you have it all set, I think it makes it easier to move throughout the process. So decide up front who is part of all of these different steps. Then you just work that plan as you go through. So diving in, key process decision number 1, who is creating the vision? Who is going to write it? And so the first option, because there's a few, the first one is to have the leader write the vision. So this could be one person who documents their picture of success for the future, and then they're going to set out and share it with other people. I think this can be the right choice when the leader might be the only person there at the moment. If you are trying to recruit other people to join your team, join your department, writing a vision is a great way to get people excited about that. This is also tends to be the fastest process or the fastest option because it's just one person. There's not a lot of conversation or negotiating about the content of the vision. There's less coordination, right? Those are some of the pros of having just one person write it. I think the downside, and many of you probably know this, if only one person writes the vision, the rest of the group doesn't feel as attached to it as they could. They haven't been able to share their ideas. I don't know if the vision is always as rich as it could be when it's just one person, but sometimes that is the option that it will work best for certain groups or certain large organizations or companies. The next choice could be having a small group write the vision. I think this is really common in large organizations where maybe having 60 plus people actually write it, that's not going to be as feasible. But if the company is 60 people, let's have 10 to 20 people focus on writing it. And it's ideally not going to just be the managers or owners or key leaders. It could be a cross-section of all the different groups or departments who come together to write it. And I do think this works really well when there is representatives from each of those departments. It makes sure that the voice and the thoughts and the ideas from all the different groups will be identified. So I think the vision, when a small group writes it, it can feel more well-rounded. People feel more connected to it. I do think that small group writing, it doesn't always work well when the group is pretty small to start with. You know, if you have a department of 8 people and having just 4 of them write the vision, I think it's really easy to have the other 4 people feel left out and they would not be as connected. If you have a small team, having the whole team write it can sometimes be best. So the small group works when I think you're writing it on behalf of a much larger group, which takes us right to the next one, is deciding that, is it going to be everyone in the company or the organization who writes it? At ZingTrain, we're a team of 14 people. When we write our ZingTrain visions, we all participate in the process. We all feel really connected to it. We get brought in early, or we get bought in early to it, I should say, because we helped write it. And I don't think we would ever say, oh yeah, just have 3 of the 14 of us go write this vision. We want all of us to be a part of it. I was recently in Iowa helping a moving company write a group vision, and they had about 60 people, and all 60 people contributed to it. That was really important to them. They didn't want it to be a small group or a leader, so they brought everyone in. It certainly took more time and more negotiation and more discussion, but they felt it was right for them. So you can choose which one is going to be the right one that you want to use. So choose, is it the leader? Is it a small group? Or is it going to be everyone? The next question to ask, it has the same 3 answers, but it's deciding who's going to contribute to the vision. So contributing is who is going to be offering feedback, who gets to share their thoughts and their ideas as part of this. And so this could be the asking for initial contributions on the vision. It could be contributions on that feedback. It could be further in the process as well, but decide who you're going to ask for this. So again, same choices to make. Is it the leader? Again, if the leader is the only one who writes it, and are they not going to solicit feedback from anyone? I would say this probably happens the least, because we're always looking for ways to include more people in a process, in the visioning process especially, not less. But this could be appropriate in some instances where it's just the leader who writes it and they're not going to accept any feedback to it. I think branching out from that, though, you made a different choice who writes it, then it's asking a small group, we would like your feedback on this. And Timo will talk through the feedback process. But you could be asking key decision makers, you could be asking business partners, you could be asking other employees, coworkers, whatever it is, but you're choosing a small group. Or the last option is to ask everyone in the organization, can they contribute their ideas, and do they have an opportunity to offer feedback? I can tell you from experience, Zingerman's, when we roll out a long-term vision, we do ask for feedback from everyone. And in this case, everyone is over 700 people. And so we invite all 700 plus employees to read a draft vision and then share their thoughts on it with some very structured questions that, again, we'll share with you. And I will say that doesn't mean that everyone gives feedback. I don't think 700 people share it. Maybe 20% of people do. I think we're lucky if we were to get 25% of folks giving their input. But the key thing is that everyone is invited to give feedback. We're giving the opportunity for people to share their thoughts before it becomes final. And when people have that opportunity, I think they get more bought in. So you've decided who's going to create the vision, who gets to contribute the vision. The next step is to decide who's going to make these decisions in the process, or who's going to make that final decision that says the vision is ready to no longer be a draft, but we're going to call it final. When you decide it up front and when you share how decisions are going to be made throughout the process ahead of time, I think it just helps make it run more smoothly. It takes away some of the questions or sometimes some of the anxiety of, well, how are we going to do this when we get there? Decide it up front and then just follow through on those decisions. So we use 4 decision-making styles most often at Zingerman. So we'll decide which way we make the decision is going to be right for us in the process. So the first option is to make it through consensus. This is where we all need to agree before we move forward. So everyone needs to agree that we're going to make the vision final. Everyone needs to agree on who we're going to ask to write the vision or who we're going to ask for feedback on. This works sometimes if the group coming to consensus is small. I don't know if all 700 people at Zingerman's would come to consensus on something. So we're probably not going to use a consensus model when we're thinking about the visioning process. The next one is consultative. This is where one or maybe two people will make the final decisions, but they ask for input from lots of other people. So maybe the leader hasn't decided if they want to write the vision themselves or if they want to have a small group write the vision. So they ask other people. They share and say, these are the two things that I'm considering. What are your thoughts? Should I just write it? Or do you think we should get a group of people together to write it? And people get a chance to share their input, share their thoughts. Then the leader ultimately makes the decision. But I think it's nice to hear lots of other people's opinions before you come out with the final answer. We probably use consultative most often at Zingerman's, and it works really well for us. The third choice is to make a command decision where one person makes the decision without talking to other people. This is how it will be done. Just do it because I say so. We don't use this one a lot in the organization, but there can be times when it's appropriate. I think of moments where there could be really high tension, where coming to agreement just doesn't seem likely. Or if the vision is shorter term and it needs to happen quickly, maybe one person's going to write it and they're going to roll it out and they're going to call it final, and that can make sense. Again, I think it's all situational. You find the right one for you. The last one is through making decisions through delegation. So where you ask someone else to make it, and that can also be fully appropriate at different times. If you have someone who is really passionate about the vision and about the process, delegating decisions to them only builds their excitement in the entire journey of creating this. And you can delegate with parameters. So I'm happy if you make the decision on who writes this vision, and I'd be fine if it's a small group or the entire company. You get to choose, but I want to make sure it's not just the leader, right? So I've delegated that decision to someone else, but I've told them which two of the three that I'm okay with. It's going to help ensure that it's still going to be in alignment with how we want to move forward, while still giving someone a chance to make the decisions. So once you know how you will make the decisions, then you start making them of deciding who's going to write this and how will we get feedback. You're ready to start moving on to the next steps. So I think with that, I'll turn it back to Timo.
Thanks, Joni. So we're getting to writing the first draft. We want to think about some elements of this, and we're going to talk about it in a couple of different ways, in three specifically. If leaders write it, if a small group, or if the whole organization. So we'll talk through all different layers. But in every single one of them, we always start with beginning with a list of prouds. This is what we like to call the baking soda in the biscuit step. It might seem tiny, and if you do the recipe for biscuits, you'll see that there's almost none compared to the total volume. It's a tiny amount of baking soda, and yet if you don't put it in there, you get hockey pucks instead of airy, puffy deliciousness. And so just getting really clear, we want to start and begin with this list of prouds. And for us, when we do proud, by definition, it's the recent or lifelong accomplishments, things that you already have done. Anything that comes up in your brain, up in your life until that point, organizationally, personally, etc. What we're really trying to do is try to help get that positive mindset where you feel proud, getting into the positive mind space so that you can get into your preferred and positive future. So this is one of those elements we do no matter what our varietal, whichever way we're going to start writing, this is a tool we use. So once we are writing the first draft, as I said, we talk about it in three ways. We have individual, small group, and with everyone, as we talked about in each of the pieces so far and how we decide. Now we have the first draft. Who do we want to have involved? Once we know and we've made that decision, we use two really different writing tools. The first is Hot Pen for individual or for small groups. And when we're doing this, we want to think about how do we get the information out of people's head in a kind of fast and furious writing model that allows us to get all of the stuff out and start to see things. So if we're writing this for an individual where the leaders are writing it individually and saying, this is what I want, it's the model of sharing it with a hot pen technique where you dedicate 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes and you write with pen on paper for 25 to 30 minutes about all the things that look like success for you in a certain point of time once you've decided that length, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever that may be. but you write and you don't stop writing. And if you get to the point where you have nothing to say, you use swear words, or Mary had a little lamb, or I hate Timo and Joni for making me write this. Any of those phrases, because we want to make sure the pen keeps moving, because the heart to pen to paper connection is what we want to get to. Now, in these individual and small groups, we'll read and edit it after that first draft of Hot Pen, getting it to the point where we've kind of made it something we want to share and feel comfortable sharing. Then we share with ACEs first. ACEs are advisory content experts. So the individuals who might be in your industry, or friends who know you and what you're trying to do, or someone who's done something in a similar business a state away because you met them in a Zingerman's event. But we want to use first the people who are going to be able to have the most positive impact. Gathering feedback at that point from anybody else. We'll talk about getting feedback and the tools we use later. But in this individual and small group, we want to gather feedback here and then get to the point where we can edit until you're ready to share with a larger group. So this is our kind of funneled process for a very individual or a small percentage group that's doing the writing. This is a kind of individual writing you would sharing with the rest of your group, doing some overlap, editing, helping get through the process, and getting to the point where you start to merge in the small group. You merge your shared visions into one that becomes a singular version for your organization. So if you have a CEO, a CIO, and a COO, and a CFO, all four of them would write by hot pen and edit it, and then be able to start to come together and merge those to be able to put them in the process. Now, what does this look like when we have a small group or everybody, right, in the organization? This is our large scale that Joni was talking about when she worked with 60 people at a moving company. It's what ZingTrain does for ours with 13 people. This is what we try to do oftentimes for everyone. It might be a microcosm or a small representative group. I was working with a kind of reclamation company in St. Louis, and they went through the process and said, okay, we have 200 staff. We can't have everybody, but we did a microcosm and pulled people in. So there was representation of drivers and repairers and specialists and leaders and new staff. And so we pulled everybody in. I always kind of giggle when Ari represents a microcosm, it's kind of the opposite of Noah's Ark, right? And that's two of the same, it's two of opposites. So everybody's opposites that you're trying to bring together to get as much information as possible. And in doing this part of the process, we brainstorm images of success with the group and have them put up anything that could be successful. Now this gets really big and we diverge into all sorts of big ideas. And then we vote to converge back around some themes. We vote to find the ones that most people find the most inspiring and exciting. So we're group sourcing and group processing all of this information to get themes and concepts that kind of bring us back together. We synthesize this data to find some themes. And then we recruit draft writers for each theme. One person, small groups, but we put them to work and say, okay, here's this theme. Please describe in that lovely narrative, emotion, physical representation that gets people excited, your theme and how it's working at your time of completion. So here's an image of it. For some of you visual thinkers, hot pen is up here on the left side of individual and small group. The overlap is in small group because you could do it either way, depending on the size of your group. Brainstorming is for small group and everyone who's involved. And so we think about this kind of bifurcation of, do we want to do it this way or this way? Do we want to have a lot of voices, have stuff up on the wall, have information present? Or do we want to have a couple people writing individually and getting the thoughts out of their head and share their writing? This is one of those really key implementation decisions that allow you to say, how are we going to move forward to write this vision and get these ideas in our head and allow everybody to have something to respond to. Once we have something to respond to, it gives us this great opportunity for feedback. And I'm going to give you back to Joni to discuss feedback. You're muted, Joni.
Thank you. It's not been so many years, but yeah, still mute myself. So getting feedback on the vision, certainly a key piece of this. So it's presenting the draft to the group that you chose to contribute to the vision. So remember, that was part of the decision-making process. Is you said, is it going to be just the leader who contributes? Will it be the small group? Will it be the whole group? So you present this in a more formal way to them. You can have everybody read it and come to ideas with it, or come with their thoughts and their feedback on it. You can call a group meeting. People can come together. Somebody or multiple people can read the draft out loud. I think there's great kind of power and meaning that happens when people read it or get to hear it read out loud. And then they can start to contribute the feedback. When we ask for feedback, I think what often happens is we will request it without a lot of structure. We will say, like, here's my draft vision. What do you think? And people say, like, oh, it's great. And they don't share a lot. So we have found asking very pointed, specific questions is how we will get the best feedback and get kind of the best results from it. So the 3 questions we like to ask first is, what did you find exciting or inspiring about the vision? So what is it when you read it, you thought, this sounds great. This made me really excited. I want to be a part of this. When you ask for folks to share that, it really is a great way to hear where their passion lies, where their excitement is. It also tells you where maybe you want to add some more thoughts to, because if there was that much excitement in this one area, we could make the vision even stronger in this case. So what was exciting or inspiring? You can then ask, what is not strategically sound? So what is it that when people read it, they think, yes, okay, it might be exciting, but I don't think this is actually possible. Because if it's not strategically sound, I think it's really easy to hear a vision or to read it, and you lose momentum quickly because you read, well, this is a fantasy. This is never actually going to be achieved. So let's hear early on in the process, what doesn't seem like it's actually going to happen. So ask people, what is not strategically sound? Then asking them the third question, what is missing from the vision? What is it that you would have maybe assumed was going to be a part of it, and now it is not? So what are those pieces that we could add to the vision that would strengthen it and make it even stronger? You then record their responses. So certainly if they emailed it to you or they wrote them down, you've collected them. That's great. If you're verbally talking with somebody and they're sharing their responses, make sure you're capturing it and writing it down. So that way you can refer back to it and you can follow up with people as well. We will ask these questions. I think, as I said, you could call a group meeting together. You could, the whole idea of the meeting or the whole topic is collecting feedback on the vision. So let's get together, capture it then. You again could email this out to people. You could do it in multiple meetings. It doesn't need to, or multiple ways. You have a meeting, but then you also talk to people individually, and you also email certain folks because maybe they haven't contributed yet. But again, you're offering opportunities for as many people, hopefully, as possible to give feedback and recording their responses. Once you have the feedback, that's when we would then move to step 4, which is to edit the first draft. So taking all the feedback that you received in that previous step, start to use the feedback to edit the draft. I like to think the first step of this step 4 is to be very appreciative of all the feedback that you received. I think when people take the time to give their feedback, to say what's exciting or what is missing, it's a sign that they're invested in the future, and it's a sign that they care. So hopefully we're saying thank you in a very kind, meaningful way for giving or sharing their thoughts and having an internal appreciation that they took the time to share. So starting with that appreciative lens, I think makes this step go a little bit, not even faster, but just better, or becomes more meaningful because you are so appreciative. So editing the draft, you take all that feedback that you received and you can start to synthesize it and prioritize it. So go through it, make sense of it, group similar feedback together. Again, you'll start to see the different areas where people have the most excitement or the most questions on, or you'll see several people thought the same thing was missing, right? 10 people saying something was missing is a little bit different than one person saying it was missing. I think with the prioritizing, it's just recognizing not all the feedback always holds kind of the same weight or doesn't always need as much action, as much action taken on it. Someone who shares that they're not inspired by the work that was described in the vision, that feels different than someone's feedback who says, the vision mentioned we'd plant roses in the garden, but I'd really like it if we did tulips. Like, I'm way more concerned by someone who says they're not inspired than someone who would like me to change the name of the flower that we're going to plant. Both are valid pieces of feedback, but you prioritize which one feels where you want to spend more time editing. And maybe the one about the flowers, we can do that one pretty quickly. Once you have your list, you can then go through and decide which feedback you're going to move forward with. So what changes are you going to make? If you decide to not move forward with the feedback that someone provided you, so they shared a thought in the vision about how we should purchase some new software or that we should go in this direction, but you already know it's just not strategically sound, we want to let them know. So telling them we completely appreciate their thoughts, but this isn't the right time to purchase the software or to head in that different direction or to add that into our sales portfolio or whatever it could be. Telling people that we're not going to use it, again, in that nice, soft, kind of delicate way, I think is an important piece of it. If people took time to share thoughts and they expected to see it end up in the next draft and it's not there, I don't think that feels great. You can feel very caught off guard. So a conversation about why or why not it's not going to be added, it goes a long way. Once you have decided what you are going to start to add, you then write the next draft. And when you write the next draft, this could be the same group or same individual who wrote the first one. This could also be a new group of people. We often have it be a new group. So like I said, at ZingTrain, 14 of us, we do all the brainstorming and we write the first draft all together. Somebody then writes the next draft, or usually like a group of 2 to 3 people write it. We collect feedback. Then we have a new group of 2 to 3 people start to write it. They bring another perspective into the vision, and I think they help take it even a little bit further. More minds, more thoughts make it a little bit better, at least for us. So write that next draft. Once it feels like you're in a good spot, we have prioritized feedback, we've made the changes that we want to make, then you roll it back out to the group and you get feedback again. You can ask the same 3 questions. So what is inspiring? What isn't strategically sound? What is missing? You can also ask another question that kind of like just one kind of more like ultimate question, if you will, which is there anything in this vision that you can't support moving forward? So if it feels pretty close, ready to be final, you're trying to get that official, we all are behind this, asking that question of, is there anything that you cannot support? If there's no feedback and there isn't anything in there, that's a good indicator to us that we're getting much closer to calling this vision final. When we get to this step of the drafting and the redrafting, we aren't looking necessarily for more wordsmithing. We can spend a lot of time just playing around with words and moving things around. We're looking ultimately for, can people support this moving forward? So that last kind of final question is really helpful with that. The 5th step of this process is then to repeat steps 3 and 4 until you feel ready to roll the vision out as a final version. So all the ways before, all the times we've asked for feedback, we've still had the word draft written across on top. And one of the questions we get most common when doing group visioning is, when is this no longer a draft? And it is no longer a draft when you repeat these steps back and forth and you feel ready to roll it out. How you can feel ready to roll it out, there's kind of 2 ways we kind of call it 2 ways to stop, like 2 ways to stop editing, 2 ways to make this final. So the first option is that all the decision makers will just magically agree to make it final because we all think it's perfect and it's ready to be shared. And you may already know this or you can read into it. I don't know if this ever really happens, but I think people wait for this moment, that there's just going to be this moment that occurs that like, oh, we all just take this like sigh of relief of like, it's done. It's perfect. It's everything we wanted it to be. We could spend time drafting and redrafting until we were just blue in the face. We might want it to be absolutely perfect. So I don't think it ever really will be. So if this happens where everyone magically agrees, amazing and great. We would love to hear about it. Please tell us what you did to make that happen. I think more likely, at least for us, more commonly, is the second option, which is all the decision makers feel that the vision is good and the energy has started to shift from creating or the wordsmithing of the vision to getting going on it, right? I think that we want people to feel like it's in a really good place, that it is good enough to be final. But I do think the true test is when people, yes, there's the words on the page, but the talk becomes more about, okay, how are we going to make this happen? Or let's talk about this element, or I have an idea on how we get started. And I think when those conversations start happening, it's okay. The vision, if people are actively talking about what's next, it's a pretty good sign that says the vision is good. Let's take draft off. This is now our vision for the future. Let's start talking about how to actually make it happen. Let's talk about those actions that we need to take, right? We're not looking for more feedback. We're ready to really get going on it because we want to make the vision a reality. And as Timo had mentioned, you can spend, or we can spend, a lot of time in basically the fifth step, which is repeating steps 3 and 4. There's not a set time frame to it. Some people will do 2 rounds of edits within 2 weeks. At Zingerman's, it's taken us 1 year to 2 years to get through different rounds of editing and feedback. I think it's scalable, and it just depends how much feedback you're getting and when you get to that spot of this vision feels good. I think it also depends on how long you write the vision for. A vision that's for 6 months in the future, you're probably going to spend 2 to 3 weeks maybe in this whole process. A vision for 6 years in the future, you're probably looking at more like months, right? Because it has different weight, one being 6 months and one being 6 years. So we've covered a lot, kind of in these 5 steps. So what and how to make the key decisions in the process, the different options, how you get feedback, how you take action, how you call it final. So we've been sharing and talking a lot. I think we'd love to turn it over to Katie and hear what questions have come up from the group. So I think with that, I'll stop sharing and turn it to Katie.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was so much good information and helpful across multiple sizes of like thought and industry of how many people might be writing a vision for my organization. So awesome. I think really great for everyone here. We do have a few questions, and I just want to also give a shout to all of our participants that if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we're just going to kind of run through some stuff. So the first question we have is actually from someone that we know. It's from Heather. She used to be an employee here at ZingTrain.
Hi, Heather.
So Heather asks, does the number of people who contribute to writing the vision affect the amount of editing that you're going to need to do in the end? For example, if more people are invested or involved in writing it, does that mean there might be less editing?
It's a good question. Timo, do you have thoughts?
I mean, I think I do. I think it really depends on the people who are making the decision, right? And so it's their kind of role, because if they're writing that second draft and they are making a consultative decision, then it's whoever writes it, those two will make the feedback and then it'll go from there. I don't know that it's really involved on the number of people who write the vision, because we have lots of ideas and it could be that it's easier to roll out and there's more acceptance once it's rolled out. But the number of writes really depends on how particular people are on the wordsmith and the word choices and the impact and what they want to do to iterate it and the feedback they're getting. I wish I could say, as Joni said, 2 versions, 2 edits, boom, share, roll it out. Like we could give you that simple a process, but it really is a lot of it based on the group and who's writing and when comfort starts to get in. As Joni said, I think it's one of our better definitions, right? When we are excited about working on it, as opposed to worried about what's being said, is really the definitive way to finish.
One piece of advice I have that relates to this is if you know the person who tends to give lots of feedback, like no matter what, they just always have lots and lots of thoughts. involving them in the first draft, I have found is actually really helpful because they're getting their thoughts and opinions more like solid when they write it. So when you do that first round, they will have less feedback because they've already put it into the vision. So including them earlier, because you know that feedback's coming anyway, I think it does help sometimes that initial first round. So something I've experienced before. Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Okay, a second question we have is from Liz. She's wondering if we could share some examples of themes that bubbled up in our most recent visioning process.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the themes we have particular in the top of my head, but I know ones that we tend to talk about people or staff. So thinking clearly and kind of what that usually is. There's oftentimes, if you have a physical location, like describing the physical space you're in, what it looks like, how it's working. A number of times there's finance of some manner. So is there financial goals or financial success? So there's some of those categories. If we went to the Zingerman's 2032, there's a lot of big things in there. One that I'm particularly excited about and keep in my mind is teaching youth and sharing our leadership skills training with youth. And so that's starting to be worked on. And so that's one that became a big bucket for our organization to say, how do we transfer all this information and how do we start to translate it to be able to engage youth in our community?
The most recent vision process I used was about 2 weeks ago, helping a group of different members of Zingerman's from all the different businesses write a collective vision for a new internal intranet system. So we did some brainstorming and then we voted, as Timo talked about that process. Some of the big themes that I don't know if I can remember all of them, but it was like usability. So how easy will it be to use this new intranet for sharing information? There was the technology aspect of like what platforms it would live on and how that would work. We talked about communication. So what is going to be communicated out through this? And then the rollout of a new process came up as a big theme too, of how well the rollout would go. So I think it's different themes come up based on what the topic at hand is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can also chime in here. This is something I have experience with. And one of the things when we wrote the ZingTrain 2028 vision is we thought about like each of our one thing we thought about was each of the 3 bottom lines that we have at Zingerman's, which is good food. For ZingTrain is training. So we thought about like the experience of each of our trainings, like the buckets of training so we have virtual training, we have in-person training, we have training for teams. And then we thought about good finance. So we talked about where we wanted to be financially in the future. And then we also talked about good service and how, again, sort of like the customer experience and how we wanted to treat one another at work. And then also how we wanted the customers to feel and how we were engaging. That was a really nice way to think about our themes too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question is from Gabe. They ask, do you have a seasonal vision for mail order during the holidays, or is the mail order vision further in the future, more long-term?
I believe the answer is kind of both. Like the mail order has a long-term vision, and I don't know exactly how long it goes out for. My guess would be 4 to 5 years. And then they write a vision for each season as well. So if they have a vision, let's just say for the year 2028, they write a vision for the holiday season of 2023 that says this is where we want to be this year. And the smaller visions support where they want it to be in the overall. And as Heather just put into the chat, mail order does vision every shift. So this is what we want the end of the shift to look like, to feel like this is what success would look like, that the phone calls were answered, the emails are being sent and responded to, all the boxes are being packed, and those small shift visions fit under the overarching visions as well.
And those shift visions are not long, beautiful phrase, it's oftentimes less than a paragraph, and it's talking about amount of boxes shipped,
Yeah.
calls received. So everyone coming in, because it's a lot of new employees who are coming and working, are really clear of what the goal is for that time that they're there that day.
Yep.
The beauty of visioning. You
Mhm.
can bring people together for a day, and you can bring people together for 10 years. Okay, next question. Naya, I believe is how you would say this. Naya is curious. How do you make it clear which communication channels you'd like people to use or you would not like people to use when they're contributing to a vision? I imagine this is in the feedback stage.
Yeah. I saw this one pop up and I was just jumping back to the slide to kind of remind myself, because we have those 3 questions of what was exciting or inspiring, what's not strategically sound, and we can use the vehicle that we would prefer, right? It could be a handwritten thing we hand out and want you to fill out by paper and return. We can use an email, but you're going to probably get feedback in whatever that person feels is the best way. So they may come up and interrupt you on your way to a meeting and say, hey, Katie, I've got this feedback from the vision and da, 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 da. And so even though you have a, here's what we would like, it could be a RSV, it could be a Google form that you send out with those 3 questions, right? You could have your preferred way. That feedback is going to get to you however it bubbles up. So knowing that and being mildly aware of that and suggesting, here's the way we'd ideally like to get it, but knowing that you're going to get feedback outside of that, depending on the size, right? Especially larger scale feedback. I know there are times when people have given Ari feedback as he's working around at the Roadhouse, and another employee be like, hey, I read that vision thing and I don't like this and this and this. And he's got like 4 plates on his hands. And he's like, cool, I'll write that down when I empty my hands. So yes, and is what I would say. Like, there's lots of ways following the suggested model. Here's what we're thinking. And knowing and suggesting, please use this if you could, so it's documented, we can get back to you in a more kind of consistent way. But I think it's going to come from whatever direction that person feels like they have access to you.
Yeah. We'll just add too, if there are ways that are not appropriate, I think it's okay to say that. One that comes to my mind is if you're doing it on a shared Google Doc, there are some people who don't appreciate like typing right into the document, or they don't want the feedback by highlighting it, or maybe they don't even like comments put in there. So you can set the parameters that everyone's a viewer, and here's a Google form to fill out with the feedback, or we're going to actually ask for feedback at the meeting. We will ask the 3 questions and take notes in person. So you can set it up if there's truly a way you don't want feedback. And I really agree with Timo. Giving lots of vehicles or lots of channels for people to be able to communicate the feedback, I think is important, because you're going to get richer feedback. You'll get more feedback because more people will find the way that works for them best.
How often do you engage in creating your vision?
I don't know if there's an exact time frame to it. I think Zingerman's, we in 2020 wrapped up, or we wrote a 2032 vision. So for the year 2032, when Zingerman's turns 50 years old as an organization. So we will not engage in writing another Zingerman's vision. I'm going to take a guess, maybe in 2030, we're going to start writing the next long-term vision. So we're going to have a 10-year gap. ZingTrain, we wrote a 5-year vision. So we're only going to spend 4 years in between that. I have a personal vision for a year from now. So about every 11 months, I start to write a new vision. So I think it just depends how long you go out for. I don't know if you would agree with that, Timo.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody who's here in our building today who's like, oh, we have a vision for 2025. We've been talking about it for a couple of years. It's probably time to get on writing our vision, our next vision, because it's coming up on 2025, even though it's just 2024, right? They're starting to see like, oh, this is where we want to get to. We need to plan and organize. So I think again, it's also scale, as we talked about, right? That vision for daily at the mail order, because they have an outcome they're trying to get of a bunch of people having specific information, and they use the tool of visioning. For longer term ones, it's when you need to, because you can use visioning, not this organizational, right? But the tool of visioning for anything you want to. And so, but organizational, it's getting there and prepping ahead of time to make sure that we're able to say there's enough time to get it ready, so we're not operating without a vision, I guess would be my answer.
Mhm.
Next question from Bill. He is a former professional hitting instructor for baseball. Very cool. And works with a lot of youth. So he's curious if we can expand on the vision that Zingerman's has for activating youth in leadership and training initiatives.
So we're piloting some work this summer, actually, with some 10 to 12 and 13 to 15-year-olds at a camp. They're going to be doing summer camp, and they're doing an adapted version of writing visions for kind of that week themselves in a year, kind of getting clear. I think we follow a different process with a lot of that training with youth, where we start to think about what is their personal vision and get clear what success could look like. Would be more than willing to kind of go into detail on that. I know Katie is sending out a follow-up, so we have some personal visioning webinar, and as well as kind of some documents and some stories. We could probably include those in a follow-up email to all of you to help work that process, because it's a little bit different. But it's writing out kind of what success could look like and if we get the preferred future. I'd say for yours, the one thing I like, especially in like youth and sports and leadership, right, it's writing that I didn't go 4 for 4, during the game, but I went 2 for 4, but I paid a lot of attention to things I practiced this week and noticed my stance and was aware of it and got better results. Even though I didn't get the hit, I had better results in contact. And so it's getting clear on what success incrementally might be, as opposed to I hit 4 grand slams, home runs in a game. Like, that is not connected to reality. So that's one of those tools to be able to get through that process.
Yeah. And I'll just say one of our themes of our 2032 vision, as we said, is working with youth. We'd be happy to share with you that, the entire thing, but sending you that paragraph of what that does look like for us. We're still in the process of figuring out the how we're going to spend this time working with youth and sharing with them leadership and other different initiatives or ideas. But we can share the vision. We can share what we want it to look like in the year 2032. Happy and would love thoughts on it. Would love to find what you think is inspiring in that paragraph, because
if there's anything that's not strategically sound,
I know we'd love to
great feedback.
Yeah, there's a lot of I was thinking about Bill's question too. Like, there's we might get in touch. Yeah, he just said he'd love that. I think because there's a couple of different angles that your question, like there might be parts of your question that we're not addressing here. And I think it'd be a cool conversation to have with you. I have a follow-up question from Gabe. And Timo has worked at mail order for a season. He's curious, just a little more detail on the shift vision. Who comes up with that vision? Like, who's actually the sort of like the leader of sharing that and creating that for shift?
It's shared. So the way it functions within mail order is there's about 120 year-round staff who move into supervisory leadership roles during the holiday season, when we hire a bunch of seasonal staff in order to get through. And they hire about 300 or 350 seasonal staff. And so of that 100 who are year-round staff, it's shared in the department or in the area. And so there's a shared responsibility, and they assign kind of multiple days ahead of time, so that there's a little bit of prep time, so you're able to kind of prep and be ready for your turn. But it circulates through a few leaders. And leaders doesn't mean the owners are the very top, but a supervisory layer who's interested and wants to help with that. And so it becomes a process that we go through.
Excellent. Oh, and Heather has also, thank you, Heather, also very much in alignment.
Yes, like same answer, so that's good.
Yeah. Daily to-do list for a full-time employee or the shift lead. So it might change depending on who is that person for the day. I have one more question, I believe, before we wrap things up. The question is, it feels scary to write a company vision because we might fail to achieve it. Do you have any advice for how to push past this fear?
Oh, it is scary. Like, it is. I guess practicing it is one way to get past it. When you have written it, sharing it with folks we call ACEs, which are advisory content experts, people that you feel really safe with, sharing them, like in sharing and getting feedback from one person and seeing how it goes, and then finding a second person to share it. I think is a way to help get over kind of the scaries and some of the discomfort, but it is a scary thing to put out where you want to be in the future because you're not there yet. So sometimes embracing that is a good thing. But Timo, love your thoughts too.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think if you're not a little afraid, it's probably not inspiring enough, right? And so getting clear that fear is a good thing because it means you're aiming for something bigger than just kind of tripping and falling over your goal. And so getting clear that, yes, that's exciting, that's an opportunity. And I would agree with Joni, if you have big fears about sharing that and putting that out in the universe, try something smaller of what does this week look like, or what does this month look like, or what does this one meeting look like, to give yourself that practice of the tool and seeing the results and seeing the impact, and then being able to say, okay, I can use this. I didn't know, I didn't have the answers. I figured it out after I wrote it. So I had this great promotional meeting or this great consultative meeting or whatever it may be, and say, cool, that worked out kind of exactly how I wanted. Or a dinner party, right? It can be as simple as like, I'm writing a vision for a dinner party to practice using this tool, and then say, cool, now I want to use this for my organization. Let's get bigger and say, what does that look like? We tend to teach, you know, in the very first draft, writing it to 11, turning it all the way up to 11 to get really inspiring. And then the editing process naturally minimizes and pulls it back. And so that's part of that process we use to get that inspiring and strategically sound to happen simultaneously.
Yeah, that's great advice. I will very quickly say, and then I'll wrap up. I appreciate everyone for staying a couple minutes late. If it hasn't been said already, visions don't necessarily, I think, rarely get 100% achieved also by the time the vision ends. And so I think we like to say like 80% of your vision being achieved is amazing. And you're much more likely to get that 80% achieved if you have it documented versus if you're just going for it without a shared vision of where you're going together. Okay, thank you all so much for spending this time with us and asking these really great questions. We look forward to seeing what visions might come from this. We absolutely love receiving visions from the people that we share visioning with. We are very open to being an ace in the way that we can for you, giving you feedback on the vision. If you want to share them with us, please feel free. Know we are here. Thank you very much, Joni and Timo, for spending this hour with us and sharing the information and the expertise that you have, and just your, I know you both love this work and it really shows.
Awesome.
And also, Mara, thank you for being behind the scenes and rocking out the chat and helping to collect all the great questions. We always love feedback. We'd love to hear what you thought of today. Mara, please, she has a link to a survey. So if you would like to fill it out, it's very quick. We love to hear your thoughts. It affects what we do here. We take it very seriously. And again, we'll be sending out this recording and the slides and some additional resources in a couple of days. So look out for that in your inbox. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.